Welcome, everybody. Today I am sitting down with one of my favorite people in the space, Mr. Isaac Balbin from Parcel. And I've kind of been doing this new thing lately where before I would really take my time and I would plan out questions and I'd have these super structured interviews. And that was cool, but we know each other really well, of course, and spent a lot of time talking. I want to talk a little bit about Parcel, but I just wanted to have kind of this free range chat with you because I've spent a lot of time. I've kind of in different formats been involved with Parcel for a long time. It was funny when we met. And just as an introduction, anybody who doesn't know Isaac, Isaac is the founder and CEO of Parcel. So, man, welcome. Thanks for sitting down. This will be a good time.
Yeah, no, thanks, buddy. Really happy to be here. It's, as you know, love talking to you. You've got really good head on your shoulders and, not full of yourself. It's one of those things, it's just easy to talk to you. So when I heard, that you wanted to try and do this new sort of chat, I thought, sounds brilliant.
Yeah, man. I'm kind of trying to change up the format a little bit. I'm trying to have a little bit more fun and just be a little bit more free, I guess, kind of finding my legs. I worked for a few other projects over the last while and I let this channel go for 2 years. And then looking back on it, I kind of regret that. And this is probably the most fun that I have in doing kind of in the space. And this is really where it all started for me. So I'm just glad to be able to sit down and I've got a few different things I want to talk about. We can just kind of whatever, just shoot from the hip today and have some fun. But I know that just before you sat down, you had a Parcel AMA. And I guess I'm going to get you to do what you always do, even though it's repetitive. I get it. Do you want to just kind of what is the Parcel project? And then I actually didn't get the chance to watch it because I was working, and I kind of want to hear what the latest events going on with Parcel are. So what's happening, man?
Yeah, sure. Listen, in a nutshell, Parcel is a supply chain technology where we're trying to sort of advance supply chain technology to the next level and integrate in a whole host of bleeding edge technologies. So including IoT, blockchain, quantum, all sorts of things. And then in and around all that, we're deploying our technology for the global cannabis industry because it suffers from a whole host of really unique issues that we're able to solve using a technological framework that we're building and deploying. So, if people want to know more about it, let them jump into our Telegram, let them shoot us some questions, look at some of our previous videos, find out all about that. So
definitely.
But yes, I did just do an AMA and thought that I would go to a location outside of the office so that I could be distraction free. But, it's one of those things where people, I think, don't often realize the kind of things that can try to trip you up as you're about to go about and do these things. So
you got to tell the story. I'm going to make you do it.
It was scheduled to go live 11 a.m. I was sitting down, everything was ready. And at 10:59, someone knocks on the door quite aggressively. And then I just sort of don't know what to do. I'm like, better go get it so that, these people don't distract us during the AMA. And lo and behold, it's a person who says, "Oh, listen, do you know who that car is parked just in front?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my car." He's like, "Mate, you've got to move it." I said, "I can't move it. I'm about to do this whole recording. I've got to do something." And the guy says, I need you to move it now. I can't wait an hour for you to finish. So I just start nervously looking left and right. And then he turns to me and he says, "What if I just move your car for you?" Now, and this is funny. It's one of the beautiful things about growing up and living in Australia, I think, which it's not completely unique to Australia, but it definitely exists here, where I was like, I knew I could trust him somehow inherently not to do anything dodgy and just, take my car and drive off. So I ran back inside. I grabbed my keys, but I'm in a bit of a razzle. As I pick up my keys to give them to him, they fall into my coffee cup, completely get wet, disturb the area I was about to do the recording. I quickly dry them off. I give it to him. Everyone should know he did the right thing. He moved the car back 1 meter, brought the keys back. But then on top of that, we set up a live stream on YouTube. And when we get to the point where, I'm now clicking in to try to start the live stream, well, all of a sudden YouTube's got technical difficulties, and I'm like, why? Why? But
it's
listen,
actually,
you know what?
it's pretty funny because for you, you're like, yeah, I think this is pretty typical. Like, stranger shows up at your door and is like, hey, Isaac, like, or he doesn't even know your name. He's like, hi, you got to move your car, and you're like, oh, you could just move it for me. That's not typical. But that's kind of the Aussie way. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. So, but I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we managed to get it all sorted. We had a new link. We got people to come in, and look, I think it was pretty good. It's a big challenge kicking off a project that involves blockchain and cryptocurrency. And, even though, as you know, it's like I come from an electrical engineering background, but I've had to get across so many different aspects being, in charge of a business fundamentally that does all these different things. So I can talk economic speak now. I can get out there with medical doctors and talk to them. I'm familiar with how to talk to radio personalities that abhor the long answers that I like to give, which are very detailed, and I like to think very specific. And it's all a learning experience. And even though these things are a great challenge, when you're able to just sort of believe in yourself and push past them, it's extraordinarily gratifying when you get to the end of it and you find people are really grateful for the perseverance that you do show there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's just whenever Murphy's Law, whatever can happen will, right? It's like the world we live in pretty much. So I do want to hear, because I actually missed it, and this is not like some sort of, I want to hear what's going on. Like, what's the latest with Parcel? What are you guys doing? What was the AMA about?
Yeah, so look, we came out and we gave people some updates on what's been happening. We explained about how and why we've had various delays in the project. We've now sort of got development to a place where we're really comfortable with how that's going forward, and we're actually in a really good spot. I guess a little bit of the difficulty there is there sort of needs to be this balance between respecting people that you're dealing with on a commercial basis and their requirements for confidentiality and all the rest of it. But then we also have, people who have, believed in our project, bought the token based off of that faith. And, you want to be able to repay that faith. And it's very hard not to just come out and talk about everything. As much as I like to, and thankfully I've got a lot of cooler heads that sort of rein that thing back in and sort of help me make sure that what we're putting out there is going to be in everyone's best interest. But look, previously, we obviously thought the concept we put out was great. At this point now, we have been validated by multiple sources of authority from inside the cannabis industry that we're bringing real innovation to the table, and people really want to be a part of it. As much as, cannabis does raise some eyebrows here and there, we've seen the explosion of firstly the cannabis industry and now the hemp and the CBD industry. And I mean, for us, it's much of a muchness. We can take care of both of it. But, we talk to bankers that are really happy to hear about our approach because it removes the risks that they see in working with cannabis businesses. We talk to cultivators and manufacturers and packaging companies, brands. They're also really thankful to hear that we've actually taken their opinions and their considerations into account when they're figuring out how to do things and trying to deliver them something that's going to bring them real value in a way where they don't have to change what they do. All of us on this planet are really good at something. And none of us on this planet are really good at everything. Part of the thing that's special about our species is our ability to cooperate, and beyond just tribal groups, but at incredibly large scales. It's part of the special part of what it is to be human, where we can go past a family group, a tribe, or even a nation to really be connected in this global way. It's
Yeah. And
It's one of those things that, blockchain's really helping with that as well. And it feels, I feel lucky to sort of live in a time when we're able to do that with people in, Australia, Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America. It's just an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, you and I have talked offline, and I, of course, a little bit of understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. And if people aren't excited for Parcel, they should be. And nothing really more than that needs to be said. I mean, like, it's kind of hard because I know you've got to give a certain amount of respect for the people who supported you and came in and, purchased the token and everything too. But I think there's also like a little bit of an unfair expectation, and I'll say it, you don't have to, it's okay. When, people buy your tokens and they're like, sometimes they can be a little bit pushy. Like I'm going to kind of euphemize this a little bit. They can be a little bit pushy and stuff like that. It's cool how connected we are because of the technology and Telegram and stuff. But I know, at least from like my personal experience, you work on certain projects, and it's like anybody off the street can like come over and like knock on your office door and rip that door open and just say whatever they want. And most people are like phenomenal, and they're cool and they're understanding. But of course, the anonymity that is provided by Telegram also presents some pretty interesting situations. And I think like even if you went to buy a stock, like, companies put out like quarterly reports and they do their best to communicate and whatever else. But in the real world of business, when you're trying to do something that you guys are trying to do, which is a legitimate legal business, it can be a little bit intimidating when, there's NDAs, like there's things in place, and those are in place for a reason. You can't always talk about things, but I'm personally really excited about what you guys are doing. You mentioned something, it was really interesting because you mentioned something about CBD, and we've talked before, like I've read a lot of research on it. I'm very kind of interested in some of these alternative medicines. And for the first time in my life, it was yesterday actually, I went down to my gym and I was having a workout, and they had some like CBD oil. And I don't know, I know that there is great medicinal properties to cannabis, but for the first time ever, I tried it. At the end of my workout, and I'm not like, trying to play off like a Mr. Fitness or like Mr. Big Head about it. Like I like to work out.
You do pretty well, mate. Let's be honest.
Well, whatever. That's neither here nor there. I guess what I'm trying to say is at the end of my workout, I was like, like your heart's beating and your heart's racing and stuff like that. And one of the guys at the gym who had the CBD product was like, "Hey, Matt, do you want to try this?" I was like, I don't know. Like I do a lot of, I've kind of like really gotten the jiu-jitsu bug over the last few years. And it's weird because cannabis and jiu-jitsu culture is actually like really, it's tied together, but a lot of the guys are really using a lot of CBD oil. So I think I just grabbed a drop and I tried it. And my end of your workout, endorphins are going, your heart's pumping. And I tried a little bit underneath the tongue, and I didn't really expect to feel too much. And I just noticed that immediately it had this like really calming effect on me. And I didn't feel, it wasn't like a narcotic effect. It was just like this calm, like relaxed effect. CBD is getting pretty big, man. What's your impression on CBD? Is that something that you guys could be potentially engaging with in the future? Where do you think that's heading?
Yeah, look, it's something we're engaging with already. So it's, and one thing that maybe we should contextualize here for people, the reason that CBD is much more accessible around the world than general cannabis, THC, and some of the other cannabinoids is because you're able to extract it from hemp rather than just normal cannabis. Now, it's one of the things that it's very frustrating, but there's a lot of disinformation when it comes to cannabis. And if people go out there and they say that it's a miracle drug, well, no one's going to believe anything because, like anything out there, even aspirin, it has potential negative side effects, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be open and we need to be honest about it. So what I can tell you, though, is that CBD has a very strong anti-inflammatory effect. And so that sensation that you were describing is going to probably be more related to your muscles being able to calm down, actually start to grow and not be so inflamed.
Yeah.
And that's why, you don't get that high effect that you would from your THC, Delta 9 and Delta 8 and all of these other things.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm really strong about is when we talk about cannabis and cannabis-derived products, it's not about one or another substance. It's not about just CBD or, now there's a new industry starting to evolve around CBG. It's one of those things where it's all of those things working together, and it's what they call full spectrum. If you come out and you say, and by the way, just also so people know that the only legal definition of what changes a cannabis plant from being hemp or, medicinal marijuana, is the concentration of THC within it. So in most places, if it's less than 0.3% THC, then it becomes hemp. So, and now it falls into a different regulatory bucket. But I mean, this creates all sorts of issues. For example, you're a farmer and you're growing some product, and there might be some cross-pollination or a certain set of environmental conditions that will affect your grow.
Yeah.
And what you were intending to grow as hemp might actually come out and be, 0.5% THC. So what do? Well, a regulator is going to come down and say, well, you just have to throw out that whole crop because you've now exceeded the limits of your license, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, that's not reasonable. And, any rational human being that's in that situation is probably just going to try and doctor the results that are being put out there so that they can claim that it's less than 0.3% and remain within that hemp bucket. But now people are doing all of this stuff without generating any value. I mean, it's all nonsense, and we want to try to get past all of this. Yeah. So there was a recent article that was published by a cannabis testing lab out of the United States. And I mean, they spoke to my heart because they were the first people that actually said that the classification of indica sativa or hybrid doesn't actually correlate with the outcomes that people are receiving when they use cannabis either medicinally or recreationally. In fact, to be able to get some sort of correlation there, you must look at the cannabinoids. And, this is something that we spoke about before where it's not, and, for those that don't like to get overly technical, I'm sorry, but, there's over 400 different things, so I'll keep it non-technical, that are in the cannabis plant that are going to determine how it affects you. And they don't work in isolation. When they exist together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is a special effect coined by the father of medicinal cannabis, Professor Meshulam out of Israel and the Hebrew University, where it's the entourage effect, which is, by the way, an awesome and cool name. But other than that, it's also an awesome and cool scientific effect. And we know that it exists. But I mean, listen, here in Melbourne, Australia, we recently had the opening of our first dispensary.
Nice.
But they explicitly are not going to do strain matching.
Yeah.
Right. That it's like, what's up with all of that? So that's sort of why part of our mission about what we're trying to do is to educate everybody about how these things work in a way that is easily digestible. Yeah. Because, listen, a lot of doctors don't really understand how to do it. And again, I won't say who, but a lot of them have come to us privately. The training that the government gives them is not nearly sufficient to give them a proper understanding of how to do all this. Now, one of the things that I abhor is how end users get disrespected. It's like, oh, we can't trust them to make good decisions. They're not smart enough. They're not sensible enough, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's horrific. This is to me, this is the sort of attitude that people like Stalin had. And, we can see where that ends up with your re-education camps and all of the rest of it, all for the good of the people. And stuff that. People are smart, and you need to give them respect. And all you need to do is give them the right information that is trustable, right? Verifiable.
Yep.
Blockchain. And they'll be able to make good decisions with that, because ultimately, if you're a patient, you're going to have a number of different options in how you can be treated. And one of those options might be cannabis. Another one of those options, and I do want to talk about this one a bit more, might be psilocybin. And it should be on you as a patient to make that decision, because ultimately you're the one that is going to suffer the consequences of that decision. Because listen, it's one of those things where I don't hate the pharmaceutical industry. I don't hate doctors and, you know, the AMAs of the world and all of that. And in fact, I'm only alive because of them. It's one of those things, it's not very well known, but I was actually diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia when I was 17 years of age.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, listen, part of the reason that I'm alive and I'm here today is because I'm lucky. And when I went to the doctors here in Australia, and they were able to finally find out what it was, there was a new drug available on the market, and we have this fantastic thing in our medical system called the PBS, which is the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. And because of that, for $2.50 a month, I was able to access that medication through, you know, I've got a fantastic pharmacist, I've got a fantastic oncologist. And again, in the very beginnings, I was staring down the barrel of, you know, as a 17-year-old, having to pay $200,000 a year for life-saving medication. And, you know, obviously that's not viable. So thankfully, because of the PBS, and luckily somehow, just as, you know, I was kind of on the border, my oncologist discovered that I had a complication, and there was a mutation on one of the other strands of DNA that I had. So again, I'm now in a different regulatory bucket. I qualified for getting Glivec, which is produced by a pharmaceutical company called Novartis. And I'm very thankful and I'm very appreciative for that, and I will be for my entire life.
Yeah.
But there is an element of people working in that industry that is not cool. Let's just leave it like that. I mean, we see all of the things going on with the opioid crisis in the United States, and how in some way, shape or form there are doctors and pharmaceutical companies that are responsible for that. Now, it's very difficult for anyone to directly point the finger because so much of this happens in the dark. And what we need to do as a society is just open these things up, trust our people, and shine a light on what's happening, and we'll have better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, a few things, like a few points on what you were talking about there in particular. First of all, I just wanted this to be a general discussion, so it's not like I'm trying to show whatever, but that's one of the things that the Smart Chip does that I think is like really brilliant for anybody who doesn't have like a really good understanding of like what Parcel does. Part of a part of that is having like a Smart Chip on the packaging, and you can actually link that back to everything from the strain data, user reviews, find yourself a nice pizza place, whatever it might be, right? But having that traceability and being able to know exactly, you know, laboratory test results and all that kind of thing for the product that you're using, fantastic, absolutely incredible. And no, I wasn't aware that you were diagnosed with leukemia. I'm feeling, I actually, a lot of people might not know this, of course, to talk about being Canadian before, but I agree with you in one sense. Like, the pharmaceutical company produces medicine that helps people survive, but very much to your point, you're talking about the opioid, excuse me, it's been a long day, opioid crisis. I grew up in a place in Newfoundland, and some people might say, everything makes sense now. Who knows, who know about Canada, but Newfoundland is like, it was a really cool place to grow up. Really good people, kind of just cool values, you know, you don't have to lock your car. Everybody's friendly, got kind of funny accents, but intelligent, innovative people. And they caused a considerable amount of damage at one point. You're very familiar, of course, with oxycodone. They were handing those things out like hotcakes, man. And there was a lot of lives ruined. And, you know, doctors in particular, just prescribing them left, right, and center, which is an opioid and an incredibly addictive drug, you know, to the point that I lost a lot of good friends from that growing up. And I think that the way that we've kind of demonized, we've demonized a lot of the natural medicines, and I do actually want to talk about some of those other things in a second, has really led to the demise of various things. I even we'll dig into it a little bit, but even from a psychological perspective, I don't know if I want to share the story or if I just don't, because it is actually really personal. But I had whatever. We'll let it. We're talking. We're hanging out. We'll let it buck. My father had a history of mental illness growing up, it was a little bit weird to grow up with, and they were constantly feeding him drugs, man. Constantly on this, off that, on this, off that, on this, off that, and I remember just, it was up and down and up and down. And at one point, like even, it would have been probably 5 years ago, I went to a doctor and I sat down and I was like, I was going through a rough time, and there's no shame in doing therapy. There's no shame in self-improvement or whatever. So I thought, okay, great. I live in Canada. Medical system is free. I'm going to go and see if I can't source something to work some things out, which is like, fine. People can do that. And I went there and I probably talked to this doctor for the better part of an hour. And they turned around, at the end of this, I expected this is great. And they turned around and they tried to give me a prescription for something and basically shoo me out the door. And I think that's the mentality of a lot of people. And I think that cannabis, as well as it can help for seizures and deal with issues in terms of eating when you're in, you have various sicknesses, can also be used for overall mental health as well. Sometimes, taking something like that as opposed to some of the medication that they jam down your throat, I feel can at times be alternative medicine that, we'll get into it. We'll talk a little bit. They're using MDMA. They're using, psilocybin. They're actually... Yeah, psilocybin, excuse me. They're even using LSD in microdosing and therapy sessions to be able to help people. And all this has been demonized for so long. I want to ask you what your impression on, because I think that they do it really, really well in Amsterdam. What's your, does taking these drugs, demonizing people, slamming them in jail, does that work? Do you think that works? What's your opinion in terms of accessibility, legalization, and addiction issues?
Yeah, so personally, I kind of feel that as a society, we waste too much time trying to interfere in other people's personal lives. In some ways, you could kind of make it like the gay marriage issue, right? Like, if two people were gay and they want to get married, it's like, what right do I have to tell them that they can't do it?
Agree.
Now, I think similarly in this regard, even if we look at some of the worst things out there, heroin, or some things like that, let me even flip it this way.
Yeah.
There are very legitimate arguments, and it's been opened up by law in places like Belgium, and we allow assisted suicide. Now, if we're going to allow assisted suicide, by what moral stance can we say that we're not going to allow people to shoot up heroin? I mean, it's not something I would advise. It's not something I would want to do. It's definitely something that I would strongly counsel my children against.
Yeah. But
if a person is an adult, they have a right to their own body. And as long as no other life form is being harmed, I find it difficult to see why we need to get involved. And I think it's condescending, patronizing, and immoral for us to say, well, as a society, we'll be better off if we all get involved and we don't let people do A, B, and C. You know what I mean? I do. I think we've got other things in society that can help people do that. Religion gets demonized all the time for trying to go too far into people's lives and interfere with things. And in many cases does. But I mean, on the other hand, if you want to live your life a certain way, I mean, who has the right to tell you you're not allowed to do it? As long as you're not directly harming other people. I mean, listen, even things like Scientology, right? Like, I mean, I think most people would look at Scientology, their belief systems and everything like that, and probably rightly say that it's like a joke. But if there are people who can believe in it and have a better life for doing so,
Yeah,
good on them.
for
You
sure.
know what I mean? It's.
Yeah.
I do recall I watched a YouTube once by a man named Jordan Peterson, and people asked him, "Do you believe in God?" And I found his answer to be really enlightening, where he says, "I behave as if he exists." And it just raises this interesting question that, you know, if there was something, and let's say you definitively knew that it wasn't true, it was absolute BS.
Yep.
But you also knew that if you believed as if it was true, you would have a better life. What do you do?
Yeah, I think that's great. Just to circle back to a couple of your comments as well. I mean, in Amsterdam, everything. I believe in complete legalization of all drugs. And I'm not going to sit here in front of you and try to say like I know. You know what I mean? I'd always be open to like debate and talk. But you go to Amsterdam, if you want to buy heroin in Amsterdam, you can do so. You know what I mean? Shoot it up, take care of you. But additionally, they also have one of the highest rehabilitation rates. They have fantastic places where you can go, you can get help. Because I really believe that the root of addiction is just it's an emotional issue. I wouldn't say it is a mental illness in a sense, right? And we're still throwing people, excuse my language, but we are still fucking throwing people in jail in the United States for smoking a joint. I don't subscribe to that. It doesn't make any sense to me, man. You know, alcohol. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still have a couple of drinks every once in a while, but alcohol causes more death and carnage than anything else. It's also one of the most toxic substances in the world in terms of carcinogens when it breaks down. You know, but if another individual wants to go and you know, maybe take a load off at night and relax, you know, they throw them in jail for it. Like, it's crazy, man. I think priorities are all messed up. I think
I mean, you know, I think another great example of that is actually what happened in Switzerland. So you may or may not know, in Switzerland, they had a really bad heroin epidemic, and heroin was illegal, but people were shooting up and leaving used needles, and you had the spread of other illnesses and all this crime associated with it.
Yep.
But their government's response to it was, rather than clamp down and throw these people in jail and therefore, you know, create all these negative follow-on effects, they actually set up clinics where they would give you free medical grade heroin and give you a place to use it. Yes. But then while they were doing it, they offered you counseling services. They would have doctors and nurses and everything there to, you know, find out, why are you making this choice? And, you know, how can we help you to sort of pick yourself up and move beyond this? And this, for the most part, managed to massively reduce the societal effects of this thing, you know? There are heroin injecting rooms here in Australia, and, you know, that's massively reduced incidences of, you know, where someone's drug use is affecting another person. And I think that's where you really sort of get into the point where, okay, well, you know, it's like we have to be reasonable about these things. And I mean, even with cannabis, I mean, I'm, you know, obviously an advocate of legalization of it, and I'm trying to provide technology to facilitate that. But, you know, we shouldn't have like people like, you know, smoking all sorts of cannabis, you know, next to a school, for example, and then the smell goes in there and it's distracting. It's a combination of respect and common sense is all that we need here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And like, you know, people shouldn't be smoking cannabis and thinking that they can drive either. You know, I personally, you know, there's got to be a certain amount of rules in place, but really all of this prohibition and all of this, you know, government force is just going to feed the narcos. You know what I mean? The people who are bringing in these illicit substances. Like, it's madness. It's absolute madness. These people are getting rich off of our indiscretion and kind of misunderstanding of the root of the problem, which to me is either associated with depression or some form of mental illness, really. You know what I mean? We need to be getting people help, and people should be able to really do what they want to do responsibly. That's where, that's where I come from. And of course, we hinted at it a little bit, and this was something I wanted to talk about as well. Because I watch a lot of podcasts myself, huge fan of Tim Ferriss in particular, and of course, Joe Rogan, love those guys. And Tim Ferriss is an absolute huge advocate for some of these new medicines and psychological therapies, right? Kind of, as you said, magic mushrooms, LSD.
Psilocybin, when we're being technical.
Yeah, I'm worried that I'm not going to say it properly. I read it all the time. So I'm just going to call it magic mushrooms.
It's all right, man. Come on. Practice makes perfect. As I told my son this morning, you can't be afraid of messing up.
Well, I mess up daily. I'm good at that. I'm getting better by the day. But they're finding, like, people who have experienced massive amounts of trauma in their life, using these substances are really starting to break down the walls. Because, like, we're born these really innocent creatures, I guess, like, as pure can be. And then we, like, our parents probably have issues. They pass down to us through behaviors. And then, we're jammed into these, like, public schools. And these other kids have been, like, have probably, received a lot of environmental I'm trying to say this politely, have received environmental stimulus from their parents. So you have, like, all these kids that are kind of, and there's some really good kids who are coming to these schools who are, and eventually just life kind of does certain things to you, and you really lose that purity along the way. It's not even the purity, but you just absorb a lot of BS from life, and it alters who you are. And what they're finding is that people, through some of these therapies, are able to actually break down a lot of these thoughts that have really been put into their brains from other people. I want to talk about ayahuasca as well, but I've never tried it myself. I'm extremely curious about it. I hear it's not a good time, but it's very transformative. What do you think of all these different types of kind of alternative medicines being used in psychology?
So fundamentally, I think, again, that it's immoral for us to say that we shouldn't at least investigate scientifically what the potential positive benefits of these things are. Now, some things like ayahuasca, I'm less familiar with exactly how that chemically interacts with the human body, and I do believe that the reason for that is that not sufficient medical research has been able to happen. Yeah. And that's sort of what holds these things back. And it sort of parallels with cannabis a lot of the time. Now, I actually met some people here in Australia that are really trying to advocate for the use of psilocybin and MDMA to treat specifically PTSD and depression. There's a lot of facts and figures out there. I mean, as you were describing earlier with that story with your father, yeah, antidepressants for the most part don't really work. They're only 5 or 10% better than a placebo, and let's be frank about it, that's just not good enough. Now, the studies that I've been exposed to and that I've looked through, they've actually shown that through MDMA and psilocybin assisted, given in a clinical setting with a psychologist there, that after just 3 sessions, 58% of patients reported no longer being depressed anymore and no longer suffering the effects of PTSD. Now, the interesting thing as well, if you look at things like antidepressants, where you often do get a little bit of a boost, what you find is that actually dissipates after a little bit of time, and people revert, and then doctors are like, well, I'll just double your dose or whatever it is. Yeah. Now, in the studies, again, these same ones that I was looking at, they investigated what the status was of these patients 12 months later, and they'd had no more treatment, just those first 3 sessions. And they actually found that now 68% after 12 months showed signs of vast improvement. Now, we don't know the precise mechanism of how this happens. And that's where, a lot of people are going to be able to shoot this thing down. But, let's be serious about that. First of all, why is that the case? Because we don't actually know how the brain works. Yeah. It's so complicated and it's so powerful.
Yes.
That we're still trying to figure that thing out. So to say that, We don't know exactly how it works, and that's the reason that we shouldn't go down that path. That's just being facetious.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, and similarly, I remember when I was growing up, there was a really big push against smoking cigarettes. And one of the ways that tobacco companies and others would say, well, you haven't been able to show exactly the correlation between smoking a cigarette and all of these things that, you're saying that are popping up. But just because we can't produce that direct evidence, it doesn't mean the effect doesn't exist. And I think you would be hard pressed to find a person today who's going to come and tell you, no, smoking cigarettes doesn't give you lung cancer, brain cancer, all these other things that it does.
Yeah.
And so using the same logic, what we really should have is something where we do scientifically investigate these things to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, we have to use statistical analysis because we just don't have a better tool yet. And we'll be able to get there. I mean, so what I was also able to see, there's a thing called an fMRI. And let's not worry technically what that is. The point is that it shows you brain activity and specifically, connections between different parts of the brain. Now, where the pictures that I saw, and I wish I had something here handy that I could show you. Could I bring it? No, I don't have it with me, unfortunately. But when people were given the dosages of psilocybin, you could see that the brain lights up with activity. And all of these new neural pathways are being created. And so it's easy to understand how that's going to help a person be able to get past certain sorts of mental illness. And, it's like with everything. I mean, I read a really interesting article recently that said, the title of it was something like, I don't believe electrons exist. I can't see them. I can't touch them. I can't feel them. How do I know that they're real?
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes, they get this mistaken conception that because it's been labeled as science, that it's a definite fact. I mean, even if you look at the word fact actually sometimes is just a consensus of all the scientists of the day. Yeah. So using this logic, 500 years ago, it was a fact that the world was flat.
Absolutely.
So we need to be a little bit less certain and a little bit more open to learning and continual investigations and research, because we shouldn't just have faith in dogma. We should always go out and test and prove and just allow individuals to create their own path through life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as a little bit of a caveat, it's not like I'm not out there like eating bags of mushrooms, you know what I mean? Like taking MDMA. Like I'm a firm believer that the best way to be able to do these things is in an environment surrounded by medical professionals. But I know that prohibition isn't working, and we do need to do more research on this stuff. I mean, for a long time, no medical research was even allowed on cannabis. I don't think that prohibition works. It costs us a hell of a lot of money. It pounds a ton of money into some of the largest drug cartels and some of the worst people in the world. And we're throwing people in jail for just really silly stuff, man. And it absolutely blows my mind. So I think that a lot of these alternative medicines coming up are interesting. I think a lot of the blockages are caused by subconscious thoughts that we have because of events that we experience in our life and trauma and whatever else. And I think that some of these substances, I was always really interested when I was younger. I read The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, who essentially postulated that our brain is like a filter, right? We filter out a vast amount of information because if I was paying attention, we were talking right now and I was seeing that green screen and I was watching the fan above me and, out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at the texture of the bed sheet, we would go absolutely crazy. It'd be stimulus overload, right? Right. Essentially, when you take some of these things, it allows the filter to open up a little bit. I don't know exactly how scientifically proven that has been, but I do believe that there is benefit in exploring some of these alternative therapies. And as you say, there are a significant amount of research reports that would back that up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to. We'll stop talking about crazy, crazy experimental drug things for a little bit. I want to kick it back to a little bit more of like an entrepreneurial kind of feel. Isaac, building Parcel in the last little while, what do you think the single most impactful lesson that you've learned has been in terms of like the whole affair?
It's a tricky one. In some sense, I would say don't be afraid to start things again. Is probably one of the most important lessons. I think, and maybe another one being that bad news doesn't mean that the game's over. And you know, it's an easy thing to say, but it's a difficult thing to live through. You know, like so many things in life, you know, like learning a language, you know, when you're running a business, like perseverance is key. And, you know, it's not a simple thing to be able to do. I'm incredibly lucky that, you know, my family is really supportive of what I'm doing. That really gives me the ability to go out there and do all of these crazy things, travel at the drop of a hat, and just being willing and open to just go and do what needs to be done. Yeah. It's incredibly important for this. And I mean, look, you know, we can throw out the term doctor every now and then, but let me tell you, do you know how small a percentage of the day I use any of the stuff that I learned at university? Like it's kind of funny in a way. You know, you do really need to be always open to keep learning. You know, none of us knows everything, and as a species and technological capability is becoming more and more advanced, that people become more and more specialized and segmented. But as that happens, you know, and I can kind of make an analogy here to the entourage effect, that we need more people that are not worried about being, you know, the best JavaScript developer in the world, or, you know, the best theoretical physicist in the world. You know, we need more and more people that are like, well, I can know enough about these 15 or 50 things and pull them together. And when I pull them together, I can create something that's greater than the whole of its parts. You know, that's sort of in some ways sort of what we're doing at Parcel. I mean, we're using blockchain for all these different things, but we're not blockchain fanatics. You know, if for a certain function, for a certain element of what we're doing, blockchain doesn't make sense, like we're not using it. It's that simple. The analogy that I kind of make about it when I talk to people is like, there's lots of ideas out there, but all of these ideas are like rocks. And no matter who comes up with the idea, whether it's me or whether it's some of the other fantastic members of our team, we've got to put that rock in front of everybody. And then we've all got to get out our hammer and start smashing away at this thing, right? It's like, how can it be wrong? And really tear that down in a way that no one is afraid to sort of speak up and say what could or should be wrong with it. Now, a lot of times we end up smashing that thing so much that we're just left with dust. But sometimes we get a diamond. And that's why we've been able to keep going and put something forward where, listen, you know, we compete with companies that have had tens of millions of dollars of investment. But somehow what we're putting forward is more advanced than what they've got. You know, how is that possible? I mean, because people kind of get stuck in their way of thinking, and there's too many people that are in this industry just to gouge it and get what they can from it. Whereas, you know, if you allow it to flourish and grow, sort of, you know, you'll end up getting something really spectacular out at the end. You know, I think it's an important lesson for a lot of regulatory authorities who get excited about the prospect of the cannabis industry and all those tax dollars that they're going to be able to have. And even though it is true, and the cannabis industry is an economic boom for the globe, if you gouge it too hard, you'll just kill it. and it'll be someone else in some other place that ends up reaping a lot of the benefits. I mean, like I'll never forget, and I'll hopefully never let the world forget, that it was those crazy Californians and their strange system of democracy that allowed this medical marijuana revolution to start.
Yeah.
But the way things are going, are they the ones that are going to reap the ultimate benefits of it? No. Instead, we're seeing north of the border in Canada, that's where all the biggest listed cannabis companies in the world exist.
Of course. And
that's simply because Canada kind of got its act together and, much more so at least than what's going on in the United States. But I mean, listen, it's abhorrent to me that you have companies who within the last 18 months or so got $5 billion of investment and now have only 9 months left of cash in the business. You got to be a special type of executive to mess up that bad.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Yeah, absolutely. Really good points there. My thoughts kind of are, I agree with you. I don't think I've ever in my entire life, and I've had some different, I've done a lot of weird things, man. I've been like a commercial diver, like 350 feet under the water on like Heliox. I've done some really kind of private professional roles in terms of occupational health and safety, emergency response training, and consulting for oil field. I've had a lot of different, never in my entire life, other than working in blockchain, have I really, the last 3 years, and just in terms of learning everything from like regulations, and I'm not trying to say that I'm like Mr. Entrepreneur, but I think to be a really good entrepreneur, you got to be thirsty. Like you got to love it. You got to love to learn, and you have to recognize that you don't know everything. You can't know everything. You have to be able to recruit talent. You have to really kind of know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And that's always like this ongoing ego battle within yourself because you think you're great at everything. And obviously like nobody's great at everything. Right. So it's interesting. It takes a special kind of crazy, I think, to go out there and work in blockchain and make these things happen. But it's probably one of the most enriching experiences, and sometimes absolute hell. 2019, like my God, man, I worked so hard in my life, and it was a good year. I learned a ton, lots of personal development, but an absolute hellish year. 2020 is shaping up to be really good. But you've got to be a grinder to make it. You make some really good anecdotes about just kind of the grind. And even since you started this project, in Canada, you can walk into a store right now and buy a pack of joints, walk out, find a designated area away from children, away from the public, and smoke one. Like there's been some incredible advancements, at least in terms of public perception in cannabis, even since you started this project. You know what I mean? And
right.
Being Canadian, I haven't been back there since it's been legalized, to be honest with you. So I haven't really seen it. And I totally advocate for, you got to have a certain amount of social responsibility with all the things that we're talking about, right? It shouldn't be given to kids, and there's got to be caveats in place, but it's becoming a different world. And I think that what you're doing is quickly becoming more and more relevant over the last little while. And I think that you guys are really going to surprise the world. Can I give you a dare?
Thanks, buddy. Sure.
Okay. I want to see your bookcase behind you. Second thing down on your right, fourth book in. What is it? No, other side. That would be, sorry. Yeah.
My left.
Yeah, your left. My right. Your right when you turn around. Second down, fourth book in on the right. What do you got?
Stephen Hawking, The Grand Design.
Nice. That's awesome. I read A Brief History of Time when I was younger. And I was like, it blew me away. It was really interesting. Cool. No, that's great. I'm surprised you did that. That's really cool, man.
Yeah, listen, I highly recommend it. This is a really good book. And a lot of people don't know that Stephen Hawking didn't grow up disabled.
No, I didn't know that.
Right. Like he grew up like the rest of us. And after reading a lot, this book and some of the other things that he put out there, I I got a much stronger appreciation for his willpower and his determination as he battled with disease, but was still able to give so much to all of us. So I really respect and appreciate him.
Me too. What do you think of Elon?
Love me some Elon. He's, he's out there. Listen, like all of us, sometimes he makes some mistakes, but again, like there's now a global electric car industry, like in large parts thanks to him, because he just went out there and did it. Yeah. So, listen, it's like that whole thing. He doesn't hide his mistakes like so many others do. No. He knows that what he's doing is good. And again, that's a quality that I really appreciate. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love Elon Musk. I think that this sounds so like fairy, so I won't like airy, let's call it. I don't mean fairy, but it just, I feel like I'm honored to be living in the same time as this human being, like just with everything that he does. I'm really impressed by him. He's very real. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does dumb crap. I mean, it's just a part of being a human being. It's just when you have that type of a legacy behind you, you're just more in the public eye, and you're a little bit more visible when you do screw up. But I think he's a genius. I'm always impressed with him, and I think that 1,000 years in time, people will very much know who Elon Musk was, and will be known as one of the greatest entrepreneurs in the history of time. So, love it.
And like one of the things that I really love about him, there's all these people that come out there and they talk about these big ideals and all of the rest of it, but he doesn't just talk about it. He goes and he puts his money where his mouth is, and he makes a lot. I mean, listen, I don't know many people that were able to take on NASA and win.
I know.
But look at the industry that's been created out of it. And I love that he believes enough in his own vision to go out there and progress, all of humanity. So I don't think there's any problem with him making a few quid out of it.
Neither do I. I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but different people have I think, issues with money just in the way that we grow up, because they have this impression that it's hard to attain, and it may be hard to attain a certain amount of success, definitely the amount of success that Elon Musk has attained. But I think that money in the hands of the right people can be a really powerful thing. And I think that the money in the hands of Elon Musk has the ability to really change the world. So I love the guy, man. I won't keep you for too much longer because we've been probably nearly an hour talking. I would love to keep doing these with you, Isaac. It was kind of refreshing just to sit down and just, talk about various things. I do want to encourage people to go and check out Parsl at parsl.co. I'm going to put the links down below. And the really weird thing about this modern day blockchain world is that you can go and knock on Isaac's door at any time by visiting him in Telegram. So if you want to have a chat with Isaac, really appreciate all the work that Isaac is doing and kind of framing the future of the legalization of the cannabis industry moving forward. So Isaac, man, do you have anything you want to say before we take off?
I just want to say thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You have been with us from the start. You've been a great person to know, and someone that I'd even consider you a friend. And so I can't wait for the day that we can meet face to face, because it's also one thing that I think people forget sometimes, that even though we live in the most connected time in human history, there's nothing like standing next to a person and spending time with them that way. So absolutely. I hope we can do that soon.
Yeah, I definitely consider you a friend, Isaac. We worked together for quite a while, and either I'm coming out there, or you're going to come visit me. So let's do this again soon. Isaac is a great guy. Go check out Parsl. They're changing the world one step at a time, and I think that you guys are going to do really, really well. I will talk to you soon, and you have a fantastic day, man.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
See you soon, buddy. Bye.